March 10th, 1980, Westchester County, New York. A woman in a raincoat pulled up to a Tudor-style mansion around 10:30 p.m. Inside, a world-famous doctor was sleeping, alone. Minutes later, he was dead, shot 4 times. The shooter? A headmistress of an elite girls' school and the longtime lover of Dr. Herman Tarnower. You might know him better as the creator of the Scarsdale Diet, a man whose name once topped bestseller lists and whose advice reshaped America's obsession with being thin. But this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a case that exposed power, privilege, betrayal, and a woman pushed to the brink. Was it murder, a botched suicide, or something else entirely? This is Jean Harris, Murder, Scandal, and the Diet Doctor. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends, we just got back from New York, so this is for our friends in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Ready?
Yes.
Yo, Adrian.
Okay, Rocky.
No.
Rocky.
Now, for our friends in Brooklyn, welcome. Had to do it.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who are just like you and love true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you want true crime with us all the time, please go join our closed Facebook group. As you might notice, I'm not wearing, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm not wearing my glasses today. Mm-hmm. It's because I can't find them.
I hate it when that happens. I told her we need to put an air tag on it.
I think I lost them at the ballpark, but that's a whole other story. Please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions, and you're in. Go join. Mm-hmm. I post photos and other information in there as well. Great group of folks.
Yes.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link. If you want to send Rob some coffee, he drinks it every episode.
There it
Too
is.
bad there's not a buy me some new glasses, because I think that's what's going to happen.
We might have to take that money for the coffee and get you some glasses.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text, and I have a couple.
Yes.
From Southern Pines, North Carolina. Hi, Chris and Rob. I really enjoy your podcast. I just watched the one entitled Code Red. And fun fact, I went to college at Campbell University in North Carolina with Don Marcari, who was the inspiration for Tom Cruise's character. He's an attorney and a few good men. I didn't know him well. I was an undergrad when he was in law school, but we did have mutual friends, and I do remember him. Just thought you would find that interesting.
That's pretty cool.
We do.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks again for your great podcast. Take care, Teresa.
Thanks, Teresa.
We also have one from Oklahoma City. I found your podcast about Heather Strube. I was friends with Heather and worked with her for a time. I haven't heard the podcast yet. Hope she's listened to it by now. But I wanted to say thank you for keeping Heather's memory alive. And you are very welcome, because that's why we're here. We like to talk about the victims.
Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh.
Across the plain. Sorry.
So again, I'm doing this without my glasses. Hopefully my notes are a little blurry, but we're just going to go with it.
We're going to muscle through.
It's true. Rob, have you ever heard the quote, heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman's scorn?
Yes, I have.
It's been shortened a little bit to "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Right. It was written by William Congreve, who, it's a line from actually a play called "The Mourning Bride," not like in the morning, but like boo-hoo mourning. She's in mourning.
M-O-U-R.
Yes. And this case just personifies that quote from beginning to end.
Okay.
This is a very long case. I'm breaking it into two parts because there's so much good information.
Okay.
I couldn't leave any of it out.
All right.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. CrazyKillers.com. That's with 2 Ks, by the way. CBS News, the LA Times, United Press International, CrimeLibrary.org, American Justice, and there are lots of other sources, which I'm not going to bore you with during the podcast. You can find them all in the show notes and links to all of those articles.
Must have been a lot of them.
And I do want to, there are a lot. Case is older, and it was really, really publicized, and, it was the crime of the century. We have a new crime of the century, every year.
It's older than the shoes in my closet.
This one's older than the shoes in your closet.
All right.
I really think it is.
All right.
But I do want to thank, huge shout out to Christine Volchew for suggesting this story. I hope I said your last name correctly, Christine, but thank you for writing in and suggesting the story.
Okay, good. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Jean Struven was born in 1923 in Chicago to Albert and Mildred Struven. She's a child of a privileged upbringing. She grows up in Cleveland in the suburb of Shaker Heights.
Oh, one of my really good friends was from Shaker Heights that I went to college with, Tom Pavlon. Hello, Tom.
Is Tom a Cleveland Browns fan?
Probably, which, I still like him, but, he's okay.
I like the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
It's the only time Rob and I differ.
Yeah.
She's the second of 4 children and had 2 sisters and a baby brother. Jean's dad is a really tall, menacing guy. He's 6'2", and her mom is only 4'11". He was a successful civil engineer, and he's old school, dominant husband dude.
All right.
Like me, Tarzan, you Jane kind of thing.
Where's my dinner?
Yeah. He was the head of the household, and what he said went. He was very intelligent, but he didn't have a sense of humor, I read. And on top of that, he had a horrible temper, and he didn't mind yelling all the time.
Well, see, that's why you like me, because I'm dumber than a fence post, but I'm funny.
You do make me laugh every day. But her dad suffers from mental illness, which would explain a lot. He was actually once hospitalized for manic depression. Now, Jean's dad worked really long hours, and her mom basically raised the kids. And an interesting thing about this family is that Jean's mother is a Christian Scientist. And just to clarify, Christian Science beliefs center on the idea that God is everything and the material world is an illusion. They don't believe in conventional healthcare. Christian Science emphasizes spiritual healing through prayer and understanding of God's laws. They believe that sickness and sin are not real and can be overcome through prayer, which means when someone is sick or hurt, they don't go to the hospital for help or medical attention. They pray. So when Jean and her siblings are ill, they were prayed for but never medicated. But one time, Mildred, Jean's mom, did take her baby brother to the hospital when he couldn't seem to get over the chickenpox. And according to the doctors, it was a good thing because he was on the brink of death.
Wow.
But it's only Mildred, her mom, that's the Christian Scientist. The family went to an Episcopalian church because that's where her father, who controlled what church they went to, was Episcopalian, and he always had the last word. So if that's not proof enough that whatever he said goes. Yeah. But in spite of her mom, Jean was incredibly bright. She's well-behaved. She did have sort of a self-righteous and stubborn streak, very much like her father. She was hot-tempered, and she didn't even have red hair, honey.
What are you trying to say?
Well, have you ever met a redhead who didn't have a temper that was like,
True.
I'm telling you. Takes a lot to push him there. But once he's there, Better stand back.
Yeah. It's never with you, though. I just want to make that clear.
No,
so
we don't
understands.
fight.
I know.
There's nothing for us to fight about. We're too old. We've both been through way too much to fight. There's nothing to fight about.
There you
Yeah.
go.
But she's very much like her dad, who everybody called Stroovy. And because she was so much like her father, she was nicknamed Stroovy too. And that's called foreshadowing.
Oh.
Yep, it's early. Jean is an overachiever. She's active in student government and class plays at the girls' private school she attended. Remember I said kind of living a life of privilege.
Yeah.
She made really good grades, but she apparently had trouble with spelling. Go figure. But when she's a junior in high school, she won a contest for an essay entitled, quote, "The Man I Took for Granted," end quote. It was meant to be a tribute to her own father and sort of inspired by Clarence Day's bestseller at the time, a book called Life with Father. She wrote, quote, "Oh, Mr. Day, I had your talent with which to tell the story of an equally deserving father. I have not the eloquence to bring it forth, or perhaps this realization is not entirely an appreciation of father, but a step toward appreciating men in general. It is possible someday my subject will be not the man I took for granted, but the man who took me for granted." End quote.
Wow.
And that's called foreshadowing.
Oh, gosh. Let me do it again.
Very deserving of 2.
Yeah. Well, the strange thing about that, though, she wrote that very eloquent, paragraph there, but she misspelled it.
She did not. She and her parents and siblings would summer in southern Ontario, Canada. So she's going to a private school, and then in the summertime, they just go to Ontario, Canada for the summer. Did people not work in the summer? I mean, you read a lot about, in the early 40s and stuff, people who had money, they just took the summer off and would go someplace.
We're just going up to the Hamptons for a little bit.
I mean, we're lucky if we take a day off around here.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
We get to go to Taco Bell.
We went to a baseball game where I lost my glasses, but that's a whole other story. Jean graduated high school and went on to attend Smith College, where she majored in economics and graduated magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa in 1945. She loved geology and art history. And soon after she graduates college, and in 1946, she does what all the women from Smith College who graduate Phi Beta Kappa do. She gets married.
Okay, there you go.
It's very much Mona Lisa smiles, all these really smart girls.
Yeah.
And what they really want is to get married.
Sure.
She married a man named Jim Harris. He was a handsome Navy vet who had served in World War II. He worked as a sales engineer, and Jim was an outdoorsman.
Oh, nice.
And these two do what most young couples did now that World War II was over. They settled into a house, moving to Grosse Pointe, Michigan, which made me think of the movie Grosse Pointe Blank.
Yeah.
White picket fences, gardens, washing the car on the weekends, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Jean was cooking and cleaning, and because she really didn't like staying at home, she's an overachiever, she worked as a school teacher. Mostly because the school was the closest thing to her house. She could walk there.
Okay.
In 1950, she had the first of 2 sons with her husband, Jim. David Harris was born in 1950, and his little brother, Jimmy, was born in 1952. And she left school to be with the boys, but again, she needed a challenge. So she started an in-home kindergarten school. But as the boys got bigger, Jean and Jim are starting to fight. And eventually, they just sort of ignore each other. And there apparently wasn't another woman or another man, but they grew apart. And in 1964, Jean said, "I'm out. I'm done." The divorce was final the next year, and now she was back to being a school teacher. She taught first grade. She's 42 years old, and she's a single mom of 2.
Okay.
Then she gets a call from a friend named Marge. Marge Jacobson calls up Jean and tells her, have I got a guy for you?
That's what they always say when you're divorced. I got the perfect person for you.
Well, I just have to say for the record, my good friend Julie said, I've got a guy for you. And it was the guy sitting out there. It was you.
Well, it's vice versa. Julie called me and said, you have to meet my friend.
Yeah.
Like,
and neither one of us wanted to meet.
No, we were over it.
But Marge, her friend Marge, is talking about a man named Herman Tarnower.
See, if his name was Herman, I think I would immediately gone, yeah, I don't think so.
I would have said Pee-wee? Pee-wee Herman?
Exactly. And I apologize for anyone who's named Herman out there before we get letters.
Herman Tarnower was born in Flatbush, Brooklyn in 1910 to Dora and Harry. His parents were Jewish Russian immigrants to America. Herman, or Hi, as he's mostly known by, and that's what I'm going to call him.
Okay, we can live with that.
Was the only boy of 4 children. His parents doted on their only son. He's a really bright kid, and his parents had very high expectations for him. His family's poor, and from an early age, Hi understood the value of $1. Now, at school, Hi excelled in sports and academics. As a teen, he was really good at cards, and he was a very good pool player. And he would use his winnings to send himself to college.
Oh, wow.
He went to Syracuse University.
Good man.
When he goes off to college, his classmates made fun of his Brooklyn accent. So he actually took a speech class to refine his voice. He wanted to fit in, or more than that, he wanted to stand out, but not for his Flatbush, Brooklyn accent.
For his Yo Adrian.
He didn't want to be a Yo Adrian guy. Yeah. But he hadn't lost his risk-taking personality, you know, the pool and the cards. He's always hitchhiking wherever he needs to go until he can afford to buy himself a car. Now, this is like early 40s.
Sure.
He's doing this.
Yeah.
He actually spent a summer during college hitchhiking around the country, and it was something he was really proud of. Now, Hi always wanted to be a doctor, and he took enough classes each semester to finish his pre-med training in 2 years.
Gee.
When it usually takes 4.
Yeah.
Now, back then, you went to med school, and you usually did like a fellowship or an internship, and then you came out and you're like, hey, I'm a surgeon.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be, an obstetrician. It's not like that now. Now you got to go to a residency. It's years and years of training.
Right.
But while Hi is in Europe doing a medical fellowship, his dad has a fatal heart attack. And when his mom received $5,000 in life insurance money, she sent it to Hi so he could start his medical practice. And because of this, he took care of his mother for the rest of her life.
Nice.
Good boy, right?
Yeah, good son.
He knew what kind of doctor he wanted to be, the kind who made a bunch of money. He wanted to take care of wealthy people. So he came back to New York and he set up his internal medicine and cardiology practice in Scarsdale and White Plains areas. But soon after he opened his practice, World War II broke out, and Hi joined the United States Medical Corps in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
Where he was known as an excellent physician. He would work at 3 different hospitals, and at Fort Knox, he was the chief of staff. He was promoted to lieutenant, and then captain, and then finally major. He was chosen as only one of 2 doctors to lead a study on the after effects of radiation suffered by civilians in Nagasaki after the atomic bomb was dropped.
Wow.
When he was finished, Hi hurried back to Scarsdale, where he founded the Scarsdale Medical Center. He will start the first cardiopulmonary lab in the state of New York, in between Albany and New York City, and he started a cardiac unit at White Plains Hospital. And Hi would serve as the medical director for companies like Nestle. And his patients really liked him.
Yeah, it sounds like he was a nice guy.
Yes, and he had a very warm bedside manner. And just like he wanted, the wealthy people of the area were his patients. And he sort of became a bit of a a snob the more he hung out with them. And he was known for being a tad snooty in social gatherings, and he could be very cold.
So he wasn't a nice guy.
Well, I think he had great bedside manner,
Yeah.
but then when he was in a social situation, and to me, this just says he was very insecure about where he came from.
Sure.
So he was kind of snooty in the social gatherings. That's what I took from that.
Right.
But he loves to give these parties, these elaborate dinner parties for all these rich friends and patients, usually. They were his patients, too.
Mm-hmm.
He would go on hunting trips. He'd go fishing. He'd play cards and travel with these people. He joined the Century Club to play golf and socialize with all of them. He wanted to be and was a part of the in crowd. He bought a huge home and hired a husband and wife team, Suzanne and Henry Vandervricken. She handled everything inside the house. He took care of the estate, and they actually lived with him in his home. Now, something you might have noticed, High's never been married. High's a bachelor all this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Didn't want to get married. But something I haven't talked about yet is the fact that High liked sex. He was known to be promiscuous and slept with a lot of women. He was kind of a Casanova, but he was really honest about it. He wasn't like jealous or possessive. He let all of these women know, everybody he bedded, I'm not going to be here for a long time. I'm here for a good time,
right?
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in 1966, when Jean is living in Philadelphia, where she's the director of the middle school at the Springside School for Girls in Chestnut Hill, Jean's friend Marge invites her to a dinner party in New York City, where she meets Dr. Herman Tarnower. High.
Okay.
He thinks she's smart and intriguing. She thinks he's a doctor, and she liked his air of self-confidence and how he was a take-charge man, just like her father. Because I'm telling you, High is not a looker. He might really like sex. And he might be a famous doctor, and he might have a lot of money and live in this big estate, Tudor estate up on a hill, and have people who live in his house to take care of him and everything. But he's not that attractive, at least not in my opinion. He's bald. He sort of has a beak nose, but he's smart and he's a doctor.
Money talks and looks take a walk.
Well, a lot of times, I don't care. I don't care about looks. It's all about personality for me.
Which is why you married me.
That's not what I was saying. But personality and people who are talented, those are the things that I've always been drawn to. People who are smart, have a great personality,
right.
Like you, makes me laugh, and, are very talented. So that must have been what was attracting these women.
Sure.
Right? Because Jean is not ugly. She's a pretty girl. Right? But he's a doctor, and he really liked Jean when he met her. And High was known as a bit of a cheapskate, but not with Jean. He showered her with gifts. He took her dancing. He would give her books and flowers all the time. And after only 2 months of knowing Jean, in 1967, he proposed to her with a 4-carat diamond ring.
Oh, wow.
And his friends were like, wait, what?
What happened?
High is getting married? Yeah. But when he got down on one knee and flashed that 4-carat rock, she said...
Oh, hell yeah.
She said yes. So in my opinion, High is an OG F-boy.
Yeah.
But Jean wanted a submissive relationship, and High was always the boss. And now he wants to get married. But the wedding was delayed, and not by High. Jean didn't want to uproot her 2 sons, switching schools in the middle of the school year. And Jean didn't really know if she wanted to be married again, right? She's this independent woman.
Sure.
But by the time summer rolled around and Jean's sons had finished their school year, High had time to think about it all, and now he's got cold feet. And he told her he didn't want to get married, and that she should start seeing other men who would one day want to be her husband.
And by the way, that 4-carat diamond, now where is that?
I don't know what happened to that 4-carat diamond ring. If I was her, I'd have kept it because he's the one who broke off the engagement. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm going to get emails about that. Give the ring back. Who cares? I don't know. But Hi is 58 years old. He's never been married. He's ready to go back to his F-boy ways. And even though he didn't want to get married, he was sleeping with other women all over again. And Jean still wanted to be with him, even though he's sleeping with other women.
Really?
Yep. She writes him a letter saying that marriage didn't matter as long as they could be together. So she becomes his girlfriend, companion, his partner, his traveling partner, his dinner party hostess. She's everything but his wife. And if she was his wife, he would be a cheating husband because he's still sleeping with anything that moves.
Right.
She goes around the world with him a lot. They were both really smart, and I think they liked that about each other. But Jean never had Hi's undivided attention.
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, he's got all this stuff on the side.
He's got a lot going on the side.
Yeah.
Now, in the middle of all of this, Jean is still working on herself and her career, and she wanted to make more money and have more authority. So when Springside's headmistress retired in 1970, Jean wanted her job, but she's passed over, and she's really angry about that. So she left and took a job at a small exclusive school, Thomas School in Connecticut, and she took on the job with the intention of making it the best girls' school ever. Meanwhile, she's still traveling the world with Hi. She would be by his side at dinner parties and around the country club crew, but he's still banging whatever walked whenever he wanted.
Yeah.
And while Jean's working on making her school the best, she is also battling depression. She was tired all the time. So she went to her lover, Hi, and she told him, this is what's happening to me. So he prescribed her Desoxyn. It's speed. Ooh. He's prescribed her methamphetamines.
Oh, my gosh.
And Hi knows what he's doing because he believed that Jean, who stood on her integrity, would never share her drugs and she wouldn't take more than what he prescribed. And he was right. But she's taking methamphetamines for her depression. This is a bad combination.
Yeah.
Jean continues to date Hi. She's still traveling the world with him, being his right-hand girl at all these parties and all the important stuff. But on the side, he's sleeping around. Jean doesn't care about all the other women because she knows that she's still his number one. She's number one on Hi's list.
Okay.
That is until 1974.
And what happened?
This is when Hi starts sleeping with his office assistant. Her name is Lynne Tryforos. And Lynn was like that movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. She would send him love notes and give him birthday cards. And when Jean and Hi would go on trips together, as soon as they arrived at the hotel they were staying at, the hotel would check the mail for Hi. I mean, that's like a thing back then.
Right.
Do I have any messages?
Yeah.
There was always a note from Lynn. Yeah.
And it was okay because it was his office assistant, right?
It's his right-hand girl at the office. So she sees him every single day, something that Jean does not. But when they start this affair in 1974, Lynn is 31 years old. Hi is 64.
Wow.
Jean is 51. So he's 33 years older than Lynn, his assistant. And Jean is 20 years older than this little girl, Lynn. And Lynn is more than one of his one-night stands or just a booty call. These two see each other, like I said, every single day. And Jean tried to ignore how much Lynn was a part of Hi's life. But it was pretty hard to do. Jean loved him. And I think Lynn loved him as well. Now, I don't know who Hi loved other than himself.
What did Lynn look like?
She's pretty too. She's blonde. Blonde and pretty.
Money talks and looks take a walk.
One time, Jean and Hi came home from an exotic trip, and when they arrived back at Hi's home, Lynn was standing in the driveway with her suitcase. She was ready to go to Mexico with Hi. He was leaving. He was dropping off one and picking up the other.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
just as soon as he came home from the trip with Jean. And everybody knew that High was bringing women other than Jean into his home and into his bed. But Jean can't seem to ignore Lynne the way she's ignored all these other women.
I will not be ignored, Dan.
Yes. Jean believed Lynne to be common and stupid, and a man might enjoy her as a, quote, sexual Tootsie Roll, end quote.
Wow.
But she wasn't the type he would take on dates and to dinner parties. That's what she's cooked up in her head.
Right.
She might be great in the sack, but I'm the one he wants to parade around. I'm the accomplished one, right?
Right.
Now, around this same time, Jean says that she started getting telephone calls in the middle of the night. They weren't Lynne or anyone who Jean recognized by their voice, but the caller would tell Jean that she was, quote, old and pathetic, end quote. Or they would taunt her with graphic descriptions of High and another woman having sex.
Okay.
I'm just like, why not just hang up?
Yeah. Wow.
Jean has said many times while she was at work, she would get a callback number that would turn out to be that of Lynne. And these two would end up screaming at each other on the phone. Lynne, for her part, would change her unlisted number no less than 5 times over the next 6 years she's involved with High. And each time, Jean would get the new number as a callback. Now, High, too, would get anonymous phone calls, but he didn't give a flying flip, and he'd just hang up, which is what I was saying. Why would you listen to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, not a whole lot is known about Lynne other than the fact that she was High's full-time receptionist assistant and part-time lover. Lynne did care for him, and one year for his birthday, she took out an ad on the front page of the New York Times saying, quote, "Happy birthday, High T. Love always, Lynne." And High was not happy about it, saying to Jean, quote, "Jesus, I hope none of my friends see it," end quote. To which Jean said, quote, "Why don't you suggest she use the Goodyear blimp next year? I think that's available," end quote.
I like her.
But lots of people liked Lynne. Many of High's colleagues really liked her and thought that she was a good influence on him. She was kind and thoughtful. She's also only 31.
Yeah.
Right? He's 60-something.
Right.
Also in 1974, Jean was suddenly unemployed. The Thomas School merged with the Low Hayward School, and her job and institution are poof, gone.
Wow.
Then in 1975, Jean took a job as manager of sales administration for Allied Maintenance in New York City. So on top of High's new interest in Lynne, she's struggling professionally as well.
Sure.
And she has depression, and she's taking methamphetamines every day.
What could possibly go wrong?
Lots. By 1977, Jean was back in the headmistress business, becoming the headmistress of Madeira Girls' School, which was an exclusive all-female boarding high school in McLean, Virginia. And a little bit about the school. Lucy Madeira founded the school for girls in 1906, and graduates of this school were expected to enter the most exclusive women's colleges. Nearly every institution of higher learning was sex segregated back then. But these women who graduated from this boarding school were expected to be Ivy League students after this.
Right.
The Madeira School was first located in a row house in Washington, D.C., downtown. In 1931, it moved to its present campus. This is a place that is filled with like old buildings, stables, indoor riding rings.
Wow.
They're all privileged kids.
Right.
And they've all prided themselves on going to this school. And she is so proud of herself because now she's the headmistress of this school.
Sure.
And the motto of the Madeira School was, quote, "Make haste slowly," end quote.
Okay.
That's an oxymoron.
I know. For a smart school, that's kind of weird.
But Lucy Madeira also had some other sayings, which Jean loved. Quote, "Function in disaster, finish in style," end quote.
Okay.
And, quote, keep calm at the very center of your being, end quote.
That one I understand. The others, okay.
Make haste slowly.
Yeah. All right.
Makes me think of Bridgerton, where after I watch a season of Bridgerton, I always want to tell people to make haste instead of hurry up. I just have that feeling. I feel like I need to say it that way.
Is that why you always say that to me?
Make haste. But this school is suffering when she comes in and takes over. Their graduates are no longer all going to Ivy League schools, and the girls had some disciplinary problems. It's the 70s, you know, it's free love, and everyone's, wants to be a hippie, and their board of directors hired her, and then after they hired a man named Russell Browning Associates to evaluate the state of the school. And their report didn't just say this school needs to make some changes. Mm-hmm. They also wanted to fire Jean. That was their report.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And when she finds this out, she's really upset, and she runs to Hi, her boyfriend, for comfort and encouragement. And Hi said to her, quote, hell, they'll never fire you. They're too lazy to look for a new head, end quote.
Thanks, Hi.
Wow, honey. Thanks for being so supportive.
Yeah. Jeez.
But it's just one more thing for Jean. And remember, Hi is still seeing Lynne. She's not his only choice anymore, or his first choice, really. Right. And now she's not, the first choice at her place of employment.
Yeah.
Not to mention, she is still taking speed every single day.
Man.
So she's worried about her job. She didn't have a lot of money saved. What if she didn't have any income? And what about Hi? Was he still seeing Lynne? She's getting these phone calls, and she's fighting with Lynne. And remember, she's really headstrong like her dad, and she suffers from depression like her dad.
But she's got a 4-carat diamond.
Somewhere in a drawer, maybe.
Yeah.
But Jean goes out and buys a gun because she feels like her whole life is falling apart around her. And she's thinking that if it got to be more than she could take, she would have an easy way out. By the way, suicide is never the way out, ever. Yep. It is a
permanent solution to a temporary problem.
A permanent solution to a temporary problem. Yep. And we have all kinds of information on our website. And at the beginning of the podcast and at the end of this podcast, we have numbers you can call if you ever feel this way.
Yep.
The way that Jean is feeling.
Right.
Meanwhile, back at old High's place, things are looking pretty damn good. Dr. Herman Tarnower, being a cardiologist, was always trying to get his overweight patients to lose weight, and he would give them this one-page sheet with rules for eating to help them lose weight. And it was kind of a cut the carbs, eat fish and lean meat, fruits, vegetables, no alcohol, low fat, no salt, cut out the sugar. Today, his diet is considered potentially harmful because of its restrictions and potential for nutrient and vitamin deficiencies.
Right. It
severely limits calories and certain food groups, and the side effects are fatigue, irritability, and difficulty focusing. But knowing Hi, he was just prescribing methamphetamines for those side effects.
Right.
Which makes you not hungry anyway, right?
Right.
But because he's a doctor to the wealthy, he had friends in the publishing business, and they suggested that he write a book about his diet from his medical practice called the Scarsdale Medical Center. And Hi didn't know what to think about that. He'd never written a book. He had no experience as a writer. Jean told him not to do it. She thought diet books were tacky, and he was so much more than a fly-by-night diet doc. And she thought it would damage his sterling reputation.
Okay.
But writer Sam Sinclair Baker convinced Hi he would be helping millions of people lose weight. And the complete Scarsdale Medical Diet book, which was born, included Dr. Tarnower's lifetime Keep Slim program. It was to be published by Rawson Wade Publishers. It took 3 months to take one page of a diet and make it into a book.
Yeah.
Takes me a little bit longer than that. And it included recipes and success stories. And even though Jean didn't agree, she was, of course, deeply involved. And according to her, it was a mess. The book was a mess. And she sat in the floor of High's living room for 2 weeks, rewriting and fixing the book until it was perfect by her standards. She, quote, took out the garbage in the book, end quote.
Okay.
And when the book came out on January 1st, 1978, it was an immediate New York Times bestseller.
So she did know what she was doing.
You can't get this book anymore.
Yeah.
It's out of circulation, been taken off the shelves, basically because it's a harmful diet.
Because it had high cholesterol.
You might be able to find it at a used bookstore or something.
Yeah.
But this book is such a success, High thought that others would want money for their help in writing the book. So without telling anybody, he wrote Jean a check for, what do you think he thought her work was worth?
$47.27.
$2,000.
Oh, gee.
Wrote her a check for $2,000 for her work on the book.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
You couldn't even get an editor to touch your book for $2,000 right now.
Yeah.
She's insulted. She did the work because she loved him, because she wanted him to succeed. She wanted his book to be a success. He did put her in the acknowledgments saying, quote, "We are grateful to Jean Harris for her splendid research and writing," end quote.
Geez, that and, these days, $6.70 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Yeah. But while Jean is hard at work on High's book, taking out the garbage, he's taken Lynne to dinner parties. He's got her out showing her off.
Wow.
Now, for another year and a half, Jean suffers as she watches High do more and more with Lynne while she's struggling at her position at school. And the final straw, according to Jean, came when High was being honored in 1980 as Man of the Year. High tells Jean that he will be taking Lynne to the dinner and not her.
Is this where the scorn part comes in?
It's going to get a little bit worse. And Jean is pissed. But after he reassured her that she could come to the dinner, but they'd be sitting at separate tables. Then he decides, I'll sit alone on the dais. You'll sit at one table with some friends, and Lynne's going to sit at a different table with more of my friends.
No one will notice a thing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, everybody knew.
Yeah.
Everybody knew.
Of course.
But in late February 1980, Jean is still pissed over the whole thing. I mean, she really did help him to make him who he was.
Right.
She's losing control over her life. She tells the school doctor she's running low on her meds, and she tells him what she's taking. And will you refill it for me? This is what I take. This is what High writes for me. Will you refill it? Mm-hmm. And he looks at her prescription and says, "Why are you taking a mind-altering drug? I'm not writing for that."
Yeah.
And this is when she realized maybe High is wrong for having her take these pills for 9.5 years.
Good Lord.
So she calls him and says, "The doctor here says I shouldn't take these meds you've been giving me for the past 9.5 years. And he said, quote, "He's crazy as hell. The little bit you take doesn't do any harm," end quote. Then on Thursday, March 6th, Jean actually runs out of the Desoxyn, the speed, and she goes into withdrawal and becomes paranoid and suicidal. And on top of all of this, things are going sideways at school. You see, Jean learns that there are pot parties happening in the South dorm, and the student house mother was possibly involved. Now, she's a perfectionist, and there are pot parties going on in her school.
Yeah.
So Jean sends her dean of students to check on the whole situation, and the dean of students discovered bongs as well as seeds and stems of the marijuana. And what's more, these items were found in the room of 4 of the school's most outstanding girls. So it's Thursday, March 6, 1980. Spring break is the following week. She calls an emergency meeting of the faculty and the student members, and the girls tell the group that they weren't smoking weed on campus. They only kept the bong in their room. They were smoking weed at the home of one of their grandmothers.
Oh, gee whiz.
Go on, Grandma. We're taking our bong, leaving campus, and going to a grandmother's house.
Wow.
And smoking.
But she did like Led Zeppelin, so that's okay. I'm joking.
So it's a tense meeting. There's shouting, but in the end, a vote was taken, and the 4 girls were expelled from the all-girls boarding school. So she's out of meds, she's at odds with High, and now she's expelled 4 of her best students from school. She didn't sleep that night, and the next day she had a bunch of angry parents in her office. I mean, these parents are paying $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
And it was all going down the drain.
Wow.
And these parents are wealthy and well-connected and angry and shouting at Jean. One saying, quote, "If I had known you ran this school with your own Gestapo, I never would have sent my daughter here," end quote.
Man. Wow.
Yeah.
That's cold.
Yeah. Not to mention, that same day, the Friday before spring break, the students are rallying or protesting the dismissal of these 4 girls. They're out there with signs and they're shouting, "We love you, Carrie, Kelly, Kathy, and Nina." Carrie, Kelly, Kathy, and Nina. Somebody's got a hip grandma.
Yeah.
One of the demonstration's leaders spotted a couple of teachers and screamed, quote, "You hypocrites," end quote.
Wow.
And Jean demanded that this girl who yelled the insult come to her office. She called her on the carpet. And when she gets her there, she says, quote, "How dare you speak that way to people who work for slave wages, breaking their backs to give you ingrates a decent education," end quote. Yeah. This young lady was apparently quite upset by Jean's lecture. And as she left the room, the academic dean who was there with her whispered, quote, "It's the word hypocrite she can't stand. If you'd called them, quote, assholes," end quote, she wouldn't have minded so much.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
The next day, Saturday, the girls are gone. It's spring break. And Jean is basically having a psychotic break from withdrawals off the methamphetamines. But for the past few days, Jean has been writing a letter to High. It's going to be 10 pages long.
That can't be good.
She goes through every wrong she felt she'd suffered at High's hands, and she pleaded for him to treat her better and with more respect. And she doesn't leave out her feelings about his little lover, Lynne, who is now 37 years old. High is now 69. Jean believes that Lynne has taken her place as his number one girl. She called Lynne a, quote, "vicious, adulterous psychotic," end quote. She talks about the Man of the Year banquet, saying that she would be there, quote, "even if that slut comes. Indeed, I don't care if she pops naked out of a cake with her tits frosted in chocolate," end quote.
That's pretty descriptive. Jeez. Oh, Jean.
She calls Lynne a slut and a whore throughout the entire 10 pages. She also accuses Lynne of taking, quote, "a brand new nightgown that I paid $40 for and covering it with bright orange stains," end quote. And she said that she found one of her dresses there at High's house, quote, "smeared and vile with feces," end quote.
Ugh.
She tells High that she'd found her clothes in the closet she used at High's place, destroyed. Quote, "I called your slut to talk to her about it and see what she was going to do about it. She said you cut them up yourself and blamed it on me. That was the first time it occurred to me that they had been cut, not ripped. Only someone with a thoroughly warped mind would decide that a woman with no money would ruin about 1/3 of her wardrobe for kicks," end quote.
Wow.
She tells High that some of her expensive jewelry that he had given her had been stolen from his house. She assumes that Lynne is the thief. Quote, "I only hope if she hawked them, you got something nice as a gift. Maybe I gave you some gold cufflinks after all and didn't know it," end quote. She tells High that Lynne is, quote, "dishonest, ignorant, and tasteless," end quote. Then she admits to some stuff. She tells him, "2 times I've taken money out of your wallet. The first time was to pay for the stained nightgown, and the second time to reimburse myself for the smeared dress." And Jean also admits, quote, I ripped up or destroyed anything I saw that your slut had touched and written her cutesy name on, including several books that I gave you, and she had tasteless, unmitigated gall to write in, end quote. Also, after Lynne accused Jean of making harassing phone calls, Jean did just that. Quote, the next month I called her virtually every single night only because of your rotten accusation while she sat simperingly by letting you making it, end quote. When she's finished with her 10 pages, she sends the letter by registered mail because, quote, other of her mail pieces often failed to reach him, end quote, meaning Lynne is going through his mail and keeping stuff away from him.
Right.
Then after she goes to all this trouble, she changes her mind and she calls him on Monday, March 10th, 1980, and asks him to throw it away as soon as it arrives. But that letter isn't the only thing Jean's writing. She's writing a will. She's thought about ending her life for a while now and had bought a gun, and for that very reason, but she didn't decide to end it until the morning of March 10th, when she read a letter from a student she really liked and admired that criticized her decision to expel the girls. The young lady wrote in a mild and friendly manner of her disagreement with the decision to expel the 4 pot-smoking girls. The girl told Jean, quote, this isn't a hate letter at all. I just feel that you are not handling the situation correctly, end quote.
Wow.
She went on to argue that since so many of the students there smoked weed, it was, quote, hypocritical, end quote, to so harshly punish only 4 of them.
Yeah, I mean, and she hates the word hypocritical. You know?
She does.
Yeah.
And Jean is thinking, the hits just keep on coming. Even this kid is disappointed in me.
Yeah.
And it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Oh, really?
She also writes a letter to the board of directors saying, quote, I was a person and no one ever knew, end quote. Jean decided right then she was going to end her life. She writes a note for whoever finds her body that says she wishes to be cremated as cheaply as possible and immediately thrown away. But before she did all of this, she wants to see Hi. So she called him, begging to see him that night, telling him she needed him to refill her meds. And Hi tells her, let's talk tomorrow. And Jean pleads with him. And finally he says, quote, suit yourself, end quote. She gets her gun. She drives 5 hours to get to Hi's home, to his estate. Her plan is to enjoy a few moments with him, not telling him anything. Then she would go to this little pond on his property that had a little island in the middle where there was a statue of a Buddha, a statue that Hi had bought on a trip to China with Jean. But she decides that's where she wants to kill herself.
Wow.
And when she gets to Hi's home, his estate, she lets herself into the house through the garage, and she sees that Hi didn't leave any lights on for her. He knows she's coming, but he doesn't care,
Right.
and he doesn't leave any lights on.
Okay.
And in her purse, she has a .32 caliber gun with 5 bullets in the 6-bullet chamber. She has more bullets in her pockets. She also has with her flowers. She's bringing them to Hi. She goes upstairs. She finds Hi in his blue pajamas and in his bed, and he's sleeping. And she tells him she wanted to say goodbye. Jean says she's not going to stay long. Quote, I just came to talk with you for a while, end quote. To which Hi said, quote, well, I'm not going to talk with anybody in the middle of the night, end quote.
He knew she was coming, though, right?
He knew she was coming, but he said, suit yourself. He said, let's talk about this tomorrow. And she's like, no, I'm coming. And he was like, fine, suit yourself.
Okay, I get it.
And then when she gets there, he's like, I'm not talking. I'm asleep. It's the middle of the night.
Right.
So she tells him that she brought him flowers. He ignores her. And she says to him, quote, won't you talk to me for just a little while, end quote. And according to Jean, she did not want to die before hearing some warm and reassuring words from him. But Hi is ignoring her.
Yeah.
She says, quote, I left a shawl here, end quote. And Jean goes into the bathroom, a bathroom she considered to be hers for the last 14 years. And she turns on the light and she sees a negligee and slippers that didn't belong to her and a set of hot rollers that she knew belonged to Lynne. And Jean is furious. She screams. She picks up the nightgown. She runs back into the bedroom. She tosses it on the carpet. Then she went back into the bathroom and threw the hot rollers through the open door. And there's a loud crash because these old hot rollers, like the rollers were in there, and then there was like a plastic clamshell that went over top of them.
Sure.
And she throws this through the dressing room window. She breaks a window.
Wow.
And she's still yelling when Hi, who's now out of bed and wide awake, slaps her across the face. And Jean goes back to the bathroom where she picks up a jewelry box and throws it at her own image. She throws it at the mirror and breaks this mirror. And once again, Hi comes up to her and hits her in the face, hits her across the mouth hard. And Jean sinks down in front of Hi and says, quote, "Hit me again, Hi. Make it hard enough to kill me," end quote.
Wow.
And he says to her, quote, "Get out of here. You're crazy," end quote. And when she realized that Hi wasn't going to hit her hard enough to kill her, Jean said, quote, "Okay, I'll do it myself," end quote. And she pulls out the gun from her purse and she puts it against her temple. And he grabs her hand and the gun fires, shooting him through the hand. And Hi screams, quote, "Jesus Christ, look what you've done." He's bleeding everywhere. He rushes into the bathroom. And Jean gets on her hands and knees. She's looking all over the floor for the gun because it went off in his hand and then he dropped it.
Right.
And she finds it under one of the beds. By the way, he has 2 beds in his room. I thought it was very Mary Tyler Moore show.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's like two double beds in the room.
Yeah.
So maybe he doesn't like to sleep next to anybody. I don't know.
Weird.
But she fishes this gun out from underneath one of the beds. And as she's about to raise it to her head again, Hi grabs her arm, and then Hi sat on the edge of the bed. His right hand is all wrapped up in a towel. He's got the gun with one hand, and with the other, he pushed a buzzer to call the live-in cook, housekeeper, and butler gardener. These people had lived with him, remember, all these years, Suzanne and Henry.
Right.
And their phone is busy. And Hi had taken the gun from Jean. He placed it on the bed next to him. And Jean grabs it again and raises it to her head. And Hi leaned forward and they started a tug of war over the gun. This is all according to Jean, okay? She squeezes off 2 more shots into Hi's shoulder. And the second of these 2 shots broke his collarbone and tore open the artery underneath his clavicle on the right side.
Jeez.
So Hi falls forward onto Jean, and he's still struggling for the gun, but he's bleeding. And now he's bleeding to death.
Yeah.
And according to Jean, he put his hands on her waist and pressed his thumb into her stomach. And according to Jean, again, she thought this was the barrel of the gun, not his thumb. And because she wanted to shoot herself, she fires the gun again, this time shattering Hi's upper arm. He falls back on the bed. She again puts the gun to her head and pulls the trigger, but that chamber was empty. Remember, she has 5 bullets,
right.
6 chambers. So she pulls the trigger again and fires the gun one more time into the cabinet next to the bed. But she still thinks she has bullets in this gun. So she puts the gun back to her head and pulls the trigger again 4 more times. Click, 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 click. She tries to reload the gun, but she didn't know how to get the spent bullets out of the gun's barrel. How did they get there in the first place? Did the guy in the gun store load the gun for her? I mean, that part I don't get. She didn't understand how to release the mechanism to drop the bullets. And she hits the gun on the cast iron bathtub in the bathroom trying to get these spent shells out. And she actually hits it so hard she breaks the gun. Then she shows the gun to Hi and says, quote, "I think it's dead," end quote. And he answered, quote, "You're probably right," end quote. He's dying.
Yeah.
Now, Jean thinks that Hi's phone is out of order. So she runs from the house, gets in her car, drives away. She's looking for a payphone. And the Vandervricks hear the commotion and call the police because they hear these gunshots.
Sure.
And they look out the window and they see Jean Harris speeding away in her car.
Right.
But she's looking for a phone. And it just so happened that a police car was driving by and she turned around. She gets this police officer's attention. She leads him back to the house where they're all greeted by Henry, who is yelling, quote, "She did it. She's the one," end quote.
Oh, wow.
Next week, we will discuss the famous Scarsdale Diet doctor's demise and Jean Harris's trial. But for now, that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kywolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
Okay, here's my take on what we've learned so far.
So far.
Yeah. The biggest thing is she didn't know how to get the bullets out of the
She didn't know how to get the bullets out.
Yeah.
And this is going to come up in trial too. There's a very interesting fact that's going to come out in trial when she talks about this whole thing, when she tells her whole story.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that the thing that does make me give me pause, you might say, is the fact that she was leaving, but then followed the cops to get his attention. If somebody were just totally guilty because they killed somebody, wouldn't they just run instead of trying to track down a cop?
Yeah. I think she wanted to, well, I'm not going to tell you what I think.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have to say about that.
I'll tell you next week what I really think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go with something a little bit lighter with a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. This first one comes from one of our in-laws and outlaws, Peoples.
Yay.
And it's Martin van Esbergen.
Okay.
And I hope I pronounced that right, Martin. If I didn't, I apologize. But he sent this to us and he said, I've got a great bless your heart. And I'm going to call this one, and it's something that my dad always said, and it's, why do it once when you can do it 3 times?
We say that a lot around here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, this is from Martin, and this is what he said.
Okay.
In Belgium 2018, 6 men came into a e-cigarette store at 3 o'clock. Now, I'm going to assume that this was 3 p.m. because I don't think an e-cigarette shop was open at a.m. But 3 p.m., they lifted up their shirts to show they had weapons.
Okay.
And doesn't say what kind of weapon, but guns are rare over here, so I think it would be knives, is what he said. A few started loading up on flavor vials while others demanded cash, in which the store owner responded with, who robs a store at 3 o'clock? That's right, like robbing a newspaper stand at 5. Come back at 6:30 and you'll walk away with 1,000 easy. That sounded good to them, so they turned around and left. The owner called the police, who didn't believe they would return. The owner told them he didn't think they were the brightest bulbs in the lighthouse. Now, at 5:30, they came back, but the police weren't there. So the owner tried his luck a second time and said, you guys need to get a watch. It's 5:30, not 6:30. So once again, they turned around and left.
Oh, my gosh.
At 6:30, they came back again. And at that point, the police were ready and waiting.
I think this is 3 a.m. that they came in.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what their hours are for e-cigarette stores over there, but
they're open 24/7 apparently.
Yeah, it sounds like it. They caught one right there and the other 5 later that day. Jeez.
So why do it once when you can do it 3 times?
There you go.
Yeah. I don't have any money, but if you come back and rob me in 5 hours, I'll have all the money you want.
Oh, Lord. Well, Martin, we appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Bless your heart.
All right. Number 2, the perfect crime.
Okay, this has to have something to do with cats.
Well, here it comes. 21-year-old Florida man, Daniel Valentino, led police on hours-long chase after spending all night doing drugs, stealing thousands of dollars, and crashing a Lexus into a police car.
Wow.
But even though he was in hot pursuit, he still managed to make time for the important thing like petting cats. ABC 25 News reports that while being pursued, Valentino convinced a couple to invite them into their home for some water. When Candace Noonan, Caddyshack, sorry. It made me laugh when I read that. Returned with a bottle of water, she found the suspect rolling around on the floor playing with her cats. When she sensed he might be on drugs, she called the police, and Valentino was finally captured by a police boat after escaping into a nearby canal.
Oh, my gosh. There's boats and chases and cats and, okay.
Well, here's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Cats, they'll get you every time.
Don't stop to pet the cats.
Yeah, exactly. All right, number 3, and finally. Assault and battery.
Okay.
A guy in Florida who goes by the name of Mr. Perfect was arrested last Friday for throwing a bowl of pancake batter at a woman. And now he's facing battery charges. According to reports, Mr. Perfect was drunk and went out to the porch where a woman was making pancakes for dinner. He insulted the woman and then began throwing the cooking pan and pancake batter at her.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, when police arrived, the woman had pancake batter in her hair and on her clothes, in addition to it being all over the porch. He was arrested for felony battery.
But thump.
Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Try the veal.
In the red room.
You had to have the last word.
I do, every time.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu. While you're there, you can also suggest a case, just like this one was suggested, or you can tell us about your brush with true crime.
Yes.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time for Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.